Hi, welcome to this Corbettmaths video. In this video, we're going to look at the video solutions to the Corbettmaths practice questions on percentages of amounts, and we're going to be looking at the calculator questions today. If you need any extra help on percentage of amounts using a calculator, go to Corbettmaths and go to the videos and worksheet section and scroll down to video numbers 235 and 238, and there's dedicated video tutorials there on percentages of amounts and increasing and decreasing by percentages that use calculators. Alternatively, you can scan this QR code. But in this video, we're going to focus on the video solutions to the practice questions, so let's get started. Okay, so question number one. Question number one says work out 60% of 1,900. Now this is a calculator question, so with calculator questions what I tend to do is to find 1%, and I find 1% by dividing by 100, and then I just multiply by the percentage I want. So if I want to find 60% of 1,900, I just take the 1,900, I divide that by 100 to get 1% to begin with, so 1,900 divided by 100 is 19, and then I take that 19 and then I just multiply that by the percentage I want, which is 60. So I'm going to multiply by 60, and that'll tell me 60% of 1,900. So we just divide by 100 and then multiply by the percentage we want. So let's do that. So let's do 19 multiplied by 60, and that's equal to 1,140. So the answer is 1,140, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number two. So question number two says calculate 7% of 340. So if we want to find 7% of 340, we're going to take the 340, we're going to divide that by 100, and we can use our calculator to do that, and that's equal to 3.4. And then we just take the 3.4 and we multiply that by the percentage we want, which is 7. And then if we do 3.4 multiplied by 7, that's equal to 23.8. So that means that 7% of 340 is 23.8, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number three. So question number three says all the students at a school were asked if they wanted a new school uniform, and here's some information about their responses. So 36% of the students said yes, and 17% of the students were unsure of whether they wanted a new school uniform or not, and here we don't actually have the figure for no. And part A says what percentage of the students said no. So we want to find what percentage of the students said no, so we want to find this missing percentage here. Now, if the students were asked if they wanted a new school uniform, the options were obviously yes, no, or unsure. So these three percentages will have to add together to be 100%. So let's add together 36% and 17%. So it's a calculator question, so we can just do 36 plus 17, and that's equal to 53. So that's equal to 53%. And again, it's a calculator question, so you can do it in the calculator. And then if we just do 100, take away 53, what's left would be what percentage of the students said no. So 100 take away 53 is equal to 47. So that means that 47% of the students said no, and that's it. So that's 47%, and that's it. And we can check it if we add together these percentages. Do we get 100? 36 plus 47 plus 17 is equal to 100. So that's it. So that's correct. Okay, and then if we scroll down, we're then told that 600 students attended the school. So the 600 students that attend the school, work out how many students said yes. So if we go back up, we're told that 36% of the students said yes. So we need to work out 36% of 600. So we need to work out 36% of 600, and that tells how many students said yes. So to find 36% of 600, we just take the 600, we divide it by 100 to find 1%, and 600 divided by 100 is equal to 6, and then we just take that 6 and multiply that by the percentage we want, which is 36. And if we do 6 times 36, that's equal to 216. So that means that 216 students said yes, they did want a new school uniform, and the rest either said no or unsure, and that's it. So in this question we were asked how many students said yes. Well, we went up to the table, there was 36% of the students said yes, so we needed to work out 36% of 600. And to do that, we took the 600, we divided it by 100 to get 1%, so that's equal to 6, and then we just took the 6 and multiplied that by 36, and that's equal to 216, and that's it. So let's look at our next question, question number four. So question number four says find 56% of $8,200. So if we want to find what 56% of $8,200 is, we just take the $8,200, we divide it by 100 to find 1%, and that's equal to 82. And then if we take the 82, we can just multiply that by 56, and that'll tell us 56% of 8,200. So if we do 82 multiplied by 56, that's equal to, in dollars, 4,592. So 56% of $8,200 is $4,592, and that's it. Okay, and then question number five. Question number five, we've been asked to calculate 83% of 9,000. So if we want to find 83% of 9,000, we take the 9,000, We divide it by 100 to begin with to find 1%, and that's equal to 90. And then if we take 90, we just need to multiply that by 83, and that'll tell us what 83% of 9,000 is. So if we do on our calculator 90 multiplied by 83, that's equal to 7,470. So the answer is 7,470. So that's what 83% of 9,000 is. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 6. So question number 6 says a gym has 2,500 members. So there's 2,500 members at this gym, and 70% of the gym's members have visited the gym last month. So that means that 70% of the members have visited the gym last month, but that means the rest, 30%, didn't visit the gym last month. Maybe they shouldn't have a membership. And then the question says how many members visited the gym last month. So we need to work out 70% of 2,500. So we want to find 70% of 2,500. And to do that, we take the 2,500, we divide that by 100 to find 1%, and that's equal to 25. And then if we take the 25, which is 1%, and times that by 70, we'll find 70%. So 25 multiplied by 70 is equal to 1,750. So that means that 1,750 members visited the gym last month, and the rest didn't, which would be 750. Okay, and then our next question, question number 7. Question number 7 says work out 3.5% of 140 grams. Now this question looks a bit more difficult than the rest of them because here we've got 3.5%, but we just use the same approach. We take the 140 and we divide that by 100 to find 1%, and that's equal to 1.4 grams. And then we just take that 1.4 and multiply that by the percentage we want, which is 3.5. So you just divide by 100 to find 1% and multiply by the percentage you want. So you still just multiply by the percentage you want. In this case, that's 3.5. So we're going to do 1.4 multiplied by 3.5, and that's equal to 4.9. So the answer is 4.9 grams, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 8. So question number 8, we've been asked to find 18.2% of £25,000. So to find 18.2% of a number, you just divide by 100 to find 1%, and then times by 18.2. So let's take the £25,000 and divide that by 100 to find 1%, and that's equal to £250. And then if we take that 250 and multiply that by the percentage we want, which is 18.2, that'll be 18.2% of £25,000. So 250 multiplied by 18.2 is equal to £4,550. So the answer is £4,550, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 9. So question number 9 says Madigan is paid £3,500 each month, and she saves 7% of each month's salary. And the question is, how much money will Madigan save over 1 year? There's a few different approaches we could use here. One approach is to work out 7% of 3,500, and that would then tell us how much money Madigan saves in 1 month. And then because there's 12 months in a year, there's 12 months in 1 year, you could then just multiply that by 12, and that'll tell us how much money Madigan saves over 1 year. Another approach is to take the amount of money she's paid in a month, which is 3,500, times that by 12 to find out how much money she's paid in an entire year, and then find 7% of that. And either approach will work. Actually, let's do both of them. So one approach is to take the 3,500. We could divide that by 100 to find 1%, and that's equal to £35. Then take the £35 and multiply that by 7 to see how much money she saves in each month. So £35 multiplied by 7 is equal to £245. So that means that every single month Madigan saves £245. And then if we take 245 and multiply that by 12, because it's 12 months in a year, so times by 12, is equal to £2,940. So that means that Madigan saved £2,940 over the whole year. Or the other approach is to take how much money Madigan's paid in 1 month, which is £3,500, to times that by 12 to see how much money she's paid in an entire year, which is equal to £42,000. And then we could find 7% of that. So we could take the £42,000, divide that by 100 to find 1%, which is 420, and then times it by 7. So 420 times 7 is equal to, if we times 420 by 7, that's equal to, again, £2,940, and that's it. So either one of those two approaches would work. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 10. So question number 10, we've been asked to work out 271% of 9,100. So again, we just use the same approach. We divide by 100 to find 1%, and then times by the percentage we want, which is 271. So if we take 9,100 and divide that by 100, that's equal to 91. So it means that 1% is 91. And then if we take the 91 and times that by 271, that'll tell us what 271% is. So 91 multiplied by 271 is equal to 24,661. So that's our answer, 24,661. So that's what 271% of 9,100 is. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 11. So question number 11 is a bit different than the questions we've looked at so far, because the questions we've looked at so far have just asked us to work out a percentage of an amount. This time we've been asked to increase it by 9%. So let's read question 11. We've been asked to increase £2,400 by 9%. So to do this question, there's a few different approaches we could use. One approach is to find 9% and add it on. And let's do that now. So let's take our £2,400, divide it by 100 to find 1%, so that's equal to 24. Then take the 24 and times that by 9, and 24 multiplied by 9 is equal to £216. And then we want to increase it. So that's what 9% is, but increase means we need to add that on to what we started with. So we're going to take our 2,400 and add 216, and that's equal to 2,616. So the answer is £2,616. That's what we get if we increase £2,400 by 9%, and that's it. So that's one approach. Another approach is to use a multiplier. So if we want to increase something by 9%, well, we start off with 100%. If you increase it by 9%, you then have 109%. And 109% as a decimal number, so to change from a percentage to a decimal, you just take the number, which is 109, and then you just divide it by 100, which is 1.09. So 109% is 1.09. So if you multiply something by 1.09, you increase it by 9%. So if we take the 2,400 and use multiply by 1.09, you'll see in your calculator you get that's equal to 2,616. So we've just increased it by 9% in one step, and we've just multiplied the 2,400 by the multiplier of 1.09. So that can be really useful to use a multiplier. So just multiplying it by 1.09 would increase it by 9%. If we wanted to increase something by 7%, you'd multiply by 1.07. If you wanted to increase it by 32%, you'd multiply by 1.32, and so on. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 12. So question number 12, we've been asked to increase 40 miles by 43%. So if we want to increase 40 miles by 43%, let's take the 40 miles and let's divide it by 100 to begin with to find 1%, which is 0.4. We're then going to take that 0.4 and we're going to multiply by 43 to find out what 43% is. So 0.4 multiplied by 43 is equal to 17.2. So that means that 43% of 40 miles is 17.2 miles. But we need to increase it, so we need to add that on to what we started with. So if we do 40 plus 17.2, that's equal to 57.2 miles. So 57.2 miles. And that's what we get if we increase 40 miles by 43%. Alternatively, we could use a multiplier. To increase by 43%, we multiply by 1.43. Because if you have 100% to begin with, if you increase it by 43%, you'd have 143%. And 143% as a decimal is 1.43. So if we just take our 40 and multiply that by 1.43, that's equal to 57.2. So that's it. We've increased by 43% in one step, just multiplying by that multiplier. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 13. So question number 13, this time we've been asked to decrease 18,000 by 6%. So we need to decrease it. That means we need to go down from what we started with. So we need to decrease this by 6%. So one approach is to take 18,000, to divide by 100 to find 1%, which is equal to 180. Then take the 180 and times that by 6, and that tells us what 6% is. So if we do 180 times 6, that's equal to 1,080. So that means that we want to decrease it by 1,080. So if we take 18,000 and take away 1,080, that's equal to 16,920. So that'd be equal to 16,920. And that's it, we've decreased 18,000 by 6%. So that's one approach. Another approach is to use a multiplier. Now this time, instead of increasing, we're decreasing. So if we have 100% to begin with, if we decrease that by 6%, we're left with 94%, because 100 take away 6 is 94. And 94% as a decimal is 0.94. So if you multiply something by 0.94, you decrease it by 6%. So if we take 18,000 and we multiply that by 0.94, that's equal to 16,920. And that's it. So we've decreased 18,000 by 6%. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 14. So question number 14 says to decrease 712 kilograms by 24%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use our two different approaches. The first approach is to work out what 24% is and then take it away. The other approach is to use a multiplier. So let's take the 712 and divide it by 100 to find 1%. And whenever we do 712 divided by 100, that's equal to 7.12. Then we're going to take our 7.12 and then we're going to multiply it by 24, and that'll tell us 24%. So when we do on our calculator, we take our calculator and we do 7.12 multiplied by 24, that's equal to 170.88 kilograms. So that's what 24% of 712 kilograms is. But we've been asked to decrease it by 24%, so that means we need to take that away. So we're going to do 712 subtract 170.88, and we're going to see what that's equal to. So 712 take away 170.88 is equal to 541.12 kilograms. So 541.12 kilograms, and that's it. Now there is another approach, and that's to use a multiplier. So if we want to decrease something by 24%, we start with 100%. We take away 24%, that's equal to 76%. So that means we're going to take our 712 and we're going to multiply it by 0.76. Because if you multiply something by 0.76, you're reducing it by 24%. And whenever we do 712 multiplied by 0.76, that's equal to 541.12. And that's it. So that's our answer, 541.12 kilograms. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 15. So question number 15, we've been asked to increase 7,900 by 37.4%. So we want to increase it, so it means we're going to want to work out 37.4% and add it on. So one approach is to take our 7,900 and divide it by 100 to find 1%, and that's equal to 79. And then if we take the 79, we can multiply that by 37.4, and that'll tell us what 37.4% is. So 79 multiplied by 37.4 is equal to 2,954.6. So that's what 37.4% is. Now we need to increase it, so that means we need to add it on. So let's take our 7,900 and add 2,954.6, and let's see what that's equal to. So 7,900 plus 2,954.6 is equal to 10,854.6. So that's the answer, 10,854.6. Now another approach is to use a multiplier, and if you increase something by 37.4%, well, you've 100% to begin with, then you're going to add 37.4% on, so that'll be 137.4%, and 137.4% as a decimal number will be 1.374. So if you multiply something by 1.374, that will increase it by 37.4%. So let's take our 7,900, and 7,900, just type that into my calculator, multiply by 1.374 is equal to 10,854.6. And that's it. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 16. So question number 16 says Oliver's salary is £18,000 and he's due to get an increase of 4%. And the question says, how much will this increase be? So we're not being asked to increase his salary. We're not trying to find his new salary. We just want to know how much the increase will be. So we need to work out 4% of 18,000. So to do that, let's take the 18,000 and divide it by 100 to find 1%. That's going to be equal to 180. And then if we take the 180 and multiply that by 4, then that'll tell us what 4% is. And that will be his increase. So 180, so £180 multiplied by 4 is equal to £720. So he's getting a £720 increase. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 17. So question number 17 says, a new TV is priced at £320 and in a sale it is reduced by 45%. Calculate the sale price. So you want to find the sale price of the television. Now it normally costs £320, but it's reduced by 45%. So we need to reduce this by 45%. So let's reduce it by 45%. So let's take the 320 and divide by 100 to find 1%, and that's equal to 3.2. And then if we take the 3.2 and multiply that by 45, that'll tell us what 45% is. So 3.2 multiplied by 45 is equal to 144. So that means the price is reduced by £144. So if we take the £320 and subtract £144, that'll be the sale price. So 320 subtract 144 is equal to £176. So the sale price of the television is £176. Now in this question we could, if we wanted to, use a multiplier. So if we know the price of the television is reduced by 45% and there's 100% to begin with, we'd be left with 55%. So we want to multiply 320 by 0.55. And if you do that, you get that's equal to £176 as well. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 18. So question number 18 says the price of a sofa was £1,799 and in a sale the price is reduced by 16%. How much does the sofa now cost? So we want to reduce the price of the sofa by 16%. So let's do that. So let's take the price of the sofa, the £1,799, and divide it by 100 to find 1%, which should be £17.99. And then if we take that £17.99, that 1%, and times by 16%, we can find out what 16% is. So £17.99 multiplied by 16 is equal to £287.84. So that's how much the price of the sofa is reduced by. So if we take the price of the sofa, original price of the sofa, the £1,799, and we subtract £287.84, what's left will be the sale price of the sofa. So 1799 subtract 287.84 is equal to £1,511.16. So £1,511.16. And that's it. That's the sale price of the sofa. Alternatively, we could use a multiplier. If we take the price of the sofa, the £1,799, and we multiply that by, well, it was 100% to begin with, it's reduced by 16%, so we're left with 84%, so that would be a decimal 0.84. And then if we do 1799 multiplied by 0.84, that's equal to £1,511.16 as well. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 19. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 19. So question number 19 says, Joanne sees this special offer in a shop, and the special offer is a microwave normally costs £189 and a toaster normally costs £25. And if they buy both items, you receive a 4% discount. And Joanne buys both items. How much does she pay? Okay, so let's work out the total price of the items normally. So if we take the £189 and add £25, that will be how much the microwave and the toaster should cost. So if we do 189 plus 25, that's equal to £214. So that's how much she should be paying for the microwave and toaster if there is no discount. But there's a 4% discount. So we need to reduce this by 4%. So let's find 4% to begin with. So let's take the £214 and divide by 100. And that's equal to 2.14. And then if we take the 2.14 and multiply that by 4, let's see what we get. So if we times by 4, that's equal to £8.56. So that means there's a saving of £8.56. So a discount. So if we did the £214 and subtract £8.56, what's left will be how much Joanne has to pay. So 214 subtract £8.56 is equal to £205.44. And that's it. That's how much Joanne has to pay for the items. Now in this question, whenever we find the £214, to reduce it by 4%, we could just multiply by 0.96. So if we take £214 and multiply by 0.96, that'll also reduce by 4%. And if we do that, 214 multiplied by 0.96, that's equal to 205.44p. So again, that's equal to £205.44. So you could approach this question either way. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 20. So question number 20 says, Barry earns £1,300 a month and he spends 30% of the money on his rent and 12% on bills. And we've been asked to work out how much of the £1,300 he's got left. Okay, so let's work out how much money he spends on his rent, how much money he spends on his bills, and then see how much money he's left. So in terms of his rent, we would take the 1,300, divide it by 100 to find 1%, that's equal to 13, and then take the 13 and multiply by 30, and then that'll tell us how much money he spends on his rent, because it's 30% off 1,300, and 13 multiplied by 30 is equal to £390. So he spends £390 on his rent. In terms of his bills, that's 12% of his money, so if we take the 1,300, so bills, and we divide that by 100, that's equal to £13. And then if we take the 13 and multiply that by 12, that'll be how much he spends on his bills. So 13 multiplied by 12 is equal to £156. So he spends £156 on his bills. And then finally, if we add those two together and take it away from the £1,300, that'll tell us how much money Barry's got left. So we're going to do 1,300, take away 390, and take away another 156. So let's type that into our calculator. 1,300 take away 390 take away another 156 is equal to £754. So that means that Barry is left with £754, and that's it. Now in this question, I've set it out this way on purpose. I've worked out how much he has to pay for his rent, how much he's got to pay for his bills, and then we've taken it away from the 1,300. I could, if I wanted to, add together the 30% and the 12%. That's equal to 42%. So we know that he spends 42% of his money on rent and bills. So we could just work out 42% of 1,300 by taking the 1,300 dividing by 100, which is 13, times that by 42, and you get that's equal to £546. And then if you take that away from 1,300 again, you'll be left with £754. Or alternatively, another approach that you could use is to take the 30% and the 12% away from 100%. That'll leave you with 58%, and then just work out 58% of 1,300, and that's equal to 754 as well. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 21. So question number 21 says a carton of orange juice contains 540 millilitres and a special offer carton contains an extra 35%. How many millilitres of orange juice are in the special offer carton? So the special offer carton is 35% bigger. So let's work out what 35% of the 540 millilitres is and then add it on. So let's do that. So let's take the 540 and divide it by 100 to find 1%, and that's equal to 5.4. Then if we take the 5.4 and multiply that by 35, that'll tell us what 35% of 540 is. So 5.4 multiplied by 35 is equal to 189. So that means there's 189 extra millilitres in the special offer carton. So if we take the 540 and add 189, that's equal to 729. So the 729 millilitres in the special offer carton. Now in this question is another approach that we could use. We could have just considered, well, if the special offer carton contains an extra 35%, that'll be 135%. So then we would change that to decimal, which is 1.35, and we would just take the 540 and multiply that by 1.35, and that's also equal to 729 millilitres. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 22. Okay, so question number 22, it says there's 52,800 fans at a football match between Rovers and City. And it says that 37% of the fans support Rovers and the rest support City. And the question is how many fans at the match support City? There's a few different approaches we could use here. One approach is to work out what 37% of 52,800 is. That'll be how many Rovers fans there are. Then you could take that away from 52,800 to see how many fans support City. So that's one approach. Another approach is to take 37% away from 100%. That's equal to 63%. That means that 63% of the fans support City, and then work out what 63% of 52,800 is, and that'll be how many fans support City. So you could use either approach. I'm going to use the first one. I'm going to find out how many people support Rovers to begin with. So I'm going to work out 37% of 52,800. So to do this, I'm going to find 1%, and to find 1%, I'll divide by 100, so I'll take the 52,800, I'll divide that by 100, and that's equal to 528. Then I'm going to take the 528 and multiply that by 37 to find 37%. And whenever we do 528 multiplied by 37, that's equal to 19,536. So that's how many fans support Rovers, and the rest support City. So if we take the 52,800 and subtract 19,536, then that'll be the answer. And when we work out 52,800 subtract 19,536, the answer is equal to 33,264. So that means there was 33,264 fans at the match that supported City. And that's it. So question number 23 says, in 2014, the population of a country was 4,580,000. And it says by 2024, the population has increased by 18%. Work out the population in 2024. So we need to increase 4,580,000 by 18%. So let's find 1% to begin with. So if we have our 4,580,000 and we divide that by 100, that'll be 1%, and that'll be equal to 45,800. Then we're going to take that 45,800 and we're going to multiply that by 18, and that'll tell us what 18% is. So multiply by 18 is equal to 824,400. So that's what the population increased by. So if we just take the 4,580,000 and add 824,400, that'll tell us the population of the country in 2024. So if we add 4,580,000 480,000. That gives us an answer of 5,404,400. And that's the population of the country in 2024. And that's it. Now, there was another approach, and that was to use multipliers. If you want to increase something by 18%, because it would be a 118%, you'd multiply by 1.18. So if you just multiply 4,580,000 by 1.18, that'll bring you straight to the answer of 5,404,400. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 24. So question number 24 says a vintage car was bought for £9,400 and since then the value of the car has increased by 29%. Calculate the value of the car. So we want to increase the value of the car by 29%. So let's work out what 29% is and then just add that on. So let's take the £9,400 and divide that by 100 to find 1%. So that's 94. And then if we take the 94 and multiply that by 29, that'll tell us what 29% is. So 94 multiplied by 29 is equal to £2,726. So that's how much the value of the car increased by. So if we take the original value of the car, which is £9,400, and we add the £2,726, then that'll be the value of the car now. So 9,400 plus 2,726 is equal to £12,126. And that's it. That's the value of the car now, £12,126. So just to recap, we divided by 100 to find 1%, we multiplied by 29 to find 29%, and then we added it on. Another approach is to use multipliers, and if we want to increase something by 29%, we multiply by 1.29, because when you increase it by 29%, you get 129%, and there's a decimal number, that's 1.29. So if we take 9,400 and multiply that by 1.29, you get an answer of 12,126, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 25. Okay, question number 25 says, James is buying a table and he finds the same table for sale in two different shops. There's Table World and Tables R Us. And in Table World, the price is £140 and that includes VAT. And in Tables R Us, the price is £120, but it doesn't include VAT. But when buying the table, the rate of VAT is 20%. So we need to add that 20% on to Tables R Us, because whenever you're buying something that's meant to include VAT, you've got to add that 20% on. And the question says, which shop is better value for money? You must show you're working. Okay, so in Table World, we know the price is £140. That's the price in Table World. In Tables R Us, we need to increase this by 20%. So if we want to increase by 20%, we take the price to £120, and we're going to divide that by 100 to find 1%, and that's equal to 1.2. Then if we take the 1.2 and multiply that by 20, that's equal to 24. That means the VAT is £24. So we need to increase it by £24. So if we take the 120 and add £24, that's equal to £144. So the price of the table with VAT in Table World is £140, and the price of the table including VAT in Tables R Us is £144. So the question says, which shop is better value for money? The answer is Table World. So Table World is better value for money. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 26. Okay, so question number 26 says, Harriet is travelling from Bath to Cardiff. So she's travelling from Bath to Cardiff, and her average speed was 58 miles per hour. So when she travelled from Bath to Cardiff, her average speed was 58 miles per hour. There's traffic on the return journey, and her average speed is reduced by 23%. So on her journey back, the average speed is 23% lower. And we've been asked to work out the average speed on the return journey. So we just need to decrease 58 miles per hour by 23%. So let's find out what 23% is and then take it away. So if we take the 58 and divide that by 100, so that would find 1%, which is 0.58. And then if we take the 0.58 and multiply that by 23, that'll be 23%. So 0.58 multiplied by 23 is equal to 13.34 miles per hour. So that's how much it's reduced by. So if we take the 58 and take away the 13.34, and what's left to be the average speed on the return journey. So 58 subtract answer is equal to 44.66 miles per hour. So 44.66 miles per hour. And that's Harriet's average speed on the journey home. Now there is another approach to this question, and that's to use multipliers. And if something's reduced by 23%, well, if you've got 100%, you reduce it by 23%, you're left with 77%. So we're going to multiply by 0.77. So if we just take 58 and multiply that by 0.77, that'll reduce it by 23%. So 58 multiplied by 0.77 is equal to 44.66 miles per hour. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question. Okay, so question number 27 says, Jessica buys a car that normally costs £18,750. And she received an 8% discount, so she pays 8% less, so there's a discount of 8%, and then she's going to pay in 60 equal monthly installments. And the question says, how much is each monthly installment? Okay, so what we're going to do here is, let's find out how much Jessica's got to pay. So it's reduced by 8%, there's an 8% discount, so let's work out what 8% is. So let's take the 18,750 and let's divide that by 100 to find 1%. So 18,750 divided by 100 is equal to 187.5. So that's 1%. We're now going to times that by 8 to find 8%. And if we times by 8, that's equal to £1,500. So that's the discount. So that means instead of paying £18,750, she's going to take away £1,500 because that's the discount. And so let's see what we get. So 18,750 take away 1,500 is equal to £17,250. So that's how much Jessica needs to pay for the car. But she's going to pay that over 60 equal monthly installments. So let's take the £17,250 and divide that by 60 and see what we get. So if we divide by 60, that's equal to £287.50. So that's how much Jessica's going to pay for each one of those monthly installments. And that's it. No, there is another way to this question, and rather than finding the 1% and then times it by 8 to find the 8% and then taking that away, we can do that in one step by using a multiplier. If we want to reduce something by 8%, we'll be left with 92%. So we just need to multiply 18,750 by 0.92. And when we do that, we get an answer of £17,250. That brings us straight to here. And then we just need to divide by 60. And when we divide by 60, that's equal to £287.50. So that's the cost of each one of those monthly installments. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 28. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 28. So question number 28 says, the value of a house in 2022 was £340,000. And the value of that house in 2023 had gone up by 15%, it increased by 15%. And in 2024, the value increased by another 9%. And we've been asked to work out the increase in value between 2022 and 2024. Okay, now one way we could do this is to find 1% and then times it by 15 and add that on to find the value of the house in 2023. Then get that amount, increase that by 9% by divide by 100 now to find 1%, times it by 9 and adding that on, and then work out the increase. That's one approach. I'm going to use multipliers. We're on question number 28 now, and you've probably seen me use multipliers as we've gone through this video, and multipliers are just a bit easier to do questions like this. So if we take the £340,000, if we want to increase that by 15%, well, that'll be 115%. So if we multiply by 1.15, that'll increase it by 15%. So if we take 340,000 and we multiply by 1.15, that's equal to £391,000. So that's the price of the house in 2023. Now we want to increase that now by another 9%. So if we take the 391,000 and we want to increase it by 9%, a further 9%. So if you increase by another 9%, so we'll let this be 100%, we'll increase it by 9%, so we want to multiply by 1.09. That'll increase it by another 9%. So if we take the 391,000 and multiply that by 1.09, that's equal to £426,190. So that's the price of the house, the value of the house in 2024. Now the question says, work out the increase in value between 2022 and 2024. So we want to work out the increase. So let's take them away to work out how much it's gone up by. So £426,190 take away £340,000 is equal to, if I got enough zeros out, no, one more, is equal to £86,190. So that's the increase, £86,190. That's the increase in value. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 29. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 29. So question number 29, we've got this rectangle. It's got a length of 1.2 meters and a width of 50 centimeters. Now I've noticed that one's in meters and one's in centimeters, so we may need to convert them. So we may need to perhaps change the meters into centimeters or the centimeters into meters. It's quite useful to have them as the same measurement. And then we're told the length and the width of the rectangle are both increased by 35%. And Xander says that the area will increase by 35%. Jaden says the area will increase by 70%, and Lucas says the area will increase by 82.25%. And then it says who is correct, and you must show your workings. There's a few different approaches you could use in this question, but I'm going to use one that uses multipliers because we've looked at in the previous questions how to use multipliers. So we're told that the length and the width both increase by 35%. So if something increases by 35%, the multiplier would be 1.35. If you multiply something by 1.35, you increase it by 35%. So originally it was 120 centimeters for the length, and I've just changed that into centimeters. And if we multiply that by 1.35, that'll find us the new length. So if we do 120 multiplied by 1.35, that's equal to 162 centimeters. So when the length of this rectangle is increased by 35%, it'll become 162 centimeters. Now let's have a look at the width. The width was 50 centimeters. We want to increase it by 35%, so let's multiply that by 1.35. So 50 multiplied by 1.35 is equal to 67.5 centimeters. So that's fantastic. We now know the length and the width of the original rectangle, and we've got the length and the width of the enlarged rectangle. Now we're then told that Xander says the area will increase by 35%, Jaden says the area will increase by 70%, Lucas says the area will increase by 82.25%. So all three of them are talking about the area. So let's find the area of the original rectangle, and let's find the area of the enlarged rectangle. So in terms of the original one, to find the area we would do the length multiplied by the width. So the length is 120 centimeters, multiplied by the width, which is 50 centimeters. And when we do 120 multiplied by 50, that's equal to 6,000 centimeters squared. So that's the area of this original rectangle. Now when it's enlarged, we now know that the length will become 162 centimeters and the width will become 67.5 centimeters. And if we multiply them together, then that'll tell us the area of the enlarged rectangle. So 162 multiplied by 67.5 is equal to, that's equal to 10,935 centimeters squared. So when the length and the width of the rectangle are increased by 35%, the area will increase from 6,000 centimeters squared to 10,935 centimeters squared. Now we want to find what the area increases by. So if we actually think about it, if we have the original one, which is 6,000, and then if we multiply it by something and then get an answer of 10,935, we'll be multiplying by the multiplier. And then we can have a look at the multiplier and figure out, if we know what the multiplier is, what it's increased by, what the percentage increase has been. So let's take the 10,935 and divide it by 6,000. So 10,935 divided by 6,000 is equal to 1.8225. So that means the multiplier would be 1.8225. If you take 6,000 and you multiply by 1.8225, you would get the new area. Now let's have a look at this. This is our multiplier, 1.8225. So actually, as you can see here, there's been an 82.25% increase, because obviously if you have 100% to begin with, and then they've added on 82.25% to get a multiplier of 1.8225. So that means there's been an 82.25% increase. So that means that Lucas is correct. And that's it. So Lucas is correct. And that's it. Okay, so that's one approach to that question. I just want to go back again. Okay, so I've just gone back to this point again where we've got the area of the original rectangle and we've got the area of the enlarged rectangle. Now in terms of finding this percentage increase, the one approach is to divide the new area by the original area and see what the multiplier would be, and then to figure out the percentage increase. That's one approach. Another way to find the percentage increase is to do change divided by original. So change divided by original times 100. And you may encounter that if you look at the topic called percentage change, you may encounter this. And if you do the change divided by the original times 100, it'll tell you the percentage increase. So the change, what did it change by? So it went from 6,000 up to 10,935. So if we do 10,935, take away 6,000, that's equal to 4,935. So that's the change, 4,935. Divided by the original, well, the original area was 6,000. And times by 100. And if we work this out, if we do 3,935 divided by 6,000 and then times by 100, we get that's equal to 82.25. So that means the percentage increase would be 82.25%. And that's it. So who's correct? Lucas is correct, because he says the area will increase by 82.25%. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 30. Okay, so question number 30 says, Georgina needs to buy petrol for her car, and her car can hold 70 litres of petrol. And there's already 20 litres of petrol in the tank, and Georgina's going to fill up the petrol tank. Well, if there's already 20 litres in the tank and it can hold 70, if we do 70 take away 20, that's equal to 50. So that means that she's going to put another 50 litres of petrol into the tank. And then we're told the price of petrol is 145.9p per litre. So that's the price of the petrol. And Georgina's got a voucher that gives her 3% off the price of the petrol. How much does Georgina have to pay for the petrol? Okay, so she needs to buy 50 litres because there was 20 litres of petrol in the tank. It can hold 70, so she needs to put another 50 in. And if we do 50 multiplied by 145.9, that'll tell us the price of the petrol without the voucher. So 50 multiplied by 145.9 is equal to 7,295 pence, or £72.95. So that's how much it should cost Georgina to put in the petrol into her tank. That extra 50 litres should cost her £72.95. But she's got a voucher, and that voucher gives her 3% off the petrol price. So we need to reduce this by 3%. There's a few different ways we could do it. We could take the 72.95. We could divide it by 100 to find 1%, and that's equal to 0.7295. We could then take that 0.7295 and then multiply that by 3, and that's equal to 2.1885. So that's 3%. So that's 3%. Now we just need to reduce it by 3%. So we need to take the 72.95 and subtract the 2.1885 and see what we get. And when we do that, 72.95 take away answer is equal to 70.7615. So that's the price of the petrol. Now actually it says how much does Georgina need to pay for the petrol. Now here we're dealing with pounds here, and we've gone past the pennies, so we're going to round this. So I'm going to say it's going to cost her £70.76p. Now you could say it's going to cost her £70.77p. Perhaps the petrol station may round up, and give her less of a discount, but I probably would just round it to the nearest penny and write down £70.76p. So that's one approach. Another approach is to take the £72.95p and we want to reduce it by 3%. So if you reduce something by 3%, you're left with 97%. So if you multiply by 0.97, that would reduce it by 3%. So 72.95 multiplied by 0.97 is equal to 70.7615. And again, we could round that to the nearest penny to be £70.76p. So that's how much Georgina would have to pay for her petrol. And that's it. Okay, so let's have a look at our next question, question number 31. So question number 31 says the table gives information about the number of people voting for each party in an election. So you've got the Gold Party received 12,598 votes, the Pink Party got 9,112 votes, the Brown Party got 20,059 votes, and the Purple Party got 4,466 votes. And we're told there's 52,852 people who can vote, and there was a target that 88% of the people would vote. Was the target met? So we want to find out, did enough people vote? So in terms of this, we know there's 52,852 people, and the target is that 88% of those people would vote. So let's work out what 88% of 52,852 is. So let's take the 52,852, let's divide it by 100 to find 1%, so that would be 528.52. 52 multiplied by 88 would be equal to, so if we do 528.52 multiplied by 88, that's equal to 46,509.76. So there's a target that at least 46,509.76 people would vote. So it's not actually possible for exactly 88% of the people to vote because it doesn't work out to be a whole number. But that means that if 46,510 or more voted, that means that at least 88% of the people would vote. So that means the target was met. If there was actually 46,509, if this is rounded down or anything below this number, that means that less than 88% of the people voted, so that means the target wouldn't have been met. So let's have a look at this. So that's the target, 46,509.76. Let's add together the number of people that voted. So let's add together these numbers and see what we get. So let's do 12,598 plus 9,112 plus 20,059 plus 4,466, and that's equal to 46,235. So we want to see, is this number bigger or smaller than the target? Well, actually, it's smaller than the target. 46,235, the number of people that voted, is smaller than 46,509.76. So no, the target wasn't met. No, the target was not met. And that's it, because not enough people voted. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 32. Okay, so question number 32 says a hotel has got two types of guests. There's business guests and there's leisure guests. So there's people that are going away for business purposes and there's people that are just going away for a holiday, for leisure. And last 5,000 guests stayed at the hotel. And 66% of the guests were business guests and the rest were leisure guests. And 144 leisure guests had dinner at the hotel, and 77% of the business guests had dinner at the hotel. And the question is, how many guests did not have dinner at the hotel? Okay, so it sounds quite complicated, but actually let's break this down, okay? So let's start off with the 5,000 guests. There's 5,000 guests, and 68% of them were business guests. So let's work out what 68% is of 5,000. So let's divide by 100 to begin with. That's equal to 50. And then if we take the 50 and times it by 68, that's equal to 3,400. So that means that 3,400 guests were business guests and the rest were leisure guests. If we do 5,000, take away 3,400, that's equal to 1,600. So there's 1,600 leisure guests. Okay, we're then told that 144 of the leisure guests had dinner at the hotel. Okay, so that means that 144 of these had dinner. So 144 had dinner. And then we're told that 77% of the business guests had dinner at the hotel. So let's work out the 77% of 3,400. So 3,400 divided by 100, and that's equal to 34. And then we're going to take the 34 and we're going to multiply it by 77, because we know that 77% of the business guests had dinner at the hotel. So 34 multiplied by 77 is equal to 2,618. So 2,618 of the business guests had dinner at the hotel. So out of these 3,400, 2,618 of them had dinner. Okay, but the question asks us how many of the guests did not have dinner at the hotel. So let's start off with the leisure guests. We know that 144 of them had dinner at the hotel. So if we do 1,600, the total number of leisure guests, and take away the ones that had dinner, the 144, that's equal to 1,600 take away 144 is equal to 1,456. So that's how many leisure guests did not have dinner at the hotel. So 1,456 did not have dinner. So that's the leisure guests. So 1,456 of them did not have dinner, and the rest, 144 of them, did have dinner. And then if we go up to the business guests, we know there's 3,400 of them. 2,618 of them had dinner. So if we do 3,400 subtract 2,618, that'll tell us how many of the business guests did not have dinner. So 3,400 take away 2,618 is equal to 782. So 782 of the business guests did not have dinner at the hotel. Did not have dinner at the hotel. Okay, so the question is, how many guests did not have dinner at the hotel? Well, we know 782 of the business guests did not have dinner at the hotel. We know that 1,456 leisure guests did not have dinner at the hotel. So if we add them together, that'll tell us how many people in total, how many guests in total did not have dinner at the hotel. So 782 plus 1,456 is equal to 2,238. So that means that out of the 5,000 guests, 2,238 of them did not have dinner at the hotel. And it means the rest of them did, the 2,700 and whatever that would be. And that's it. So the question is, how many guests did not have dinner at the hotel? That's our answer. Okay, so let's have a look at our next question, question number 33. So question number 33 says, Aidan sits an exam with 3 sections. The section 1 worth 40 marks and he scores 80%. Section 2 is worth 80 marks and he scores 76.25%. And section 3 is worth 180 marks. And to pass the exam, a student needs to score at least 75% of the total marks. Work out the minimum number of marks it needs to score in section 3 to pass. And we must show all our workings. Okay, so what I'm going to do to begin with is find out how many marks Aidan needs to get in total. So it says he needs to get at least 75% of the total marks. So if we add together 40, 80 and 180, that'll tell us how many marks are all together. So 40 plus 80 plus 180 is equal to 300. There's 300 marks available altogether. So if we take 300 and we divide it by, we could divide by 4 and times by 3 to find 75%. I'm just going to divide by 100, which is equal to 3, and then 3 times 75, that'll tell us 75% of 300. So 75 multiplied by 3 is equal to 225. So that's how many marks Aidan needs to score. He needs to score at least 225 marks. So it says how many marks must he obtain in section 3. Well, we can actually work out how many marks he's obtained in section 1 by doing 80% of 40. We can work out how many marks he got in section 2 by working out 76.25% of 80. And then we'll see how many more he needs to get 225. Okay, so let's do that. So section 1. So section 1. So section 1, we need to work out 80% of 40. So let's take 40, divide it by 100 to find 1%. That's equal to 0.4. And then do 0.4 multiplied by 80. And 0.4 multiplied by 80 is 32. So that means that Aidan obtained 32 marks in section 1. In section 2, Aidan scored 76.25% of 80 marks. So we need to work out 76.25% of 80. So let's take the 80, divide it by 100 to find 1%, which is 0.8, and then we'll do 0.8 multiplied by 76.25, and we'll see what he scored in that section. So 0.8 multiplied by 76.25 is equal to 61. So he obtained 61 marks in section 2. So now we can add together and see how many marks he's got all together. So 32 plus 61 is equal to 93. So he's got 93 marks altogether so far, and he needs to get 225. So if we do 225 take away 93, that's equal to 225 take away 93, that's equal to 132. So that means that Aidan needs to get at least 132 marks out of 180 in the last section. So how many marks must he obtain? The minimum number of marks he must obtain is 132 or higher. Okay, let's look at our next question. Okay, so question number 34 says a ball is dropped from a height of 3 meters, which is 300 centimeters, and is allowed to bounce repeatedly. So it's just going to bounce, 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 and so on. And each time it rises to a height which is 80% of the height from which it fell. So, and the question says, what height does the ball rise to after the second bounce? So here we've got the ball to begin with. It's a total height of 3 meters, so 3 meters above the ground. It then falls to the ground and then bounces up, and whenever it bounces up, it reaches a height that is 80% of this height. So to find how high the ball reaches after its first bounce, we need to work out 80% of 3 meters, because each time it's 80% of the height it fell from previously. So let's work out 80% of 3 meters. So to do that, we'll take 3 meters, so we'll divide it by 100, so that's equal to 0.03, and then we'll take the 0.03 and we'll multiply that by 80, and that's equal to 2.4. So it'll rise to a height of 2.4 meters, so that height there is 2.4, just put an arrow there, 2.4 meters. Okay, then the ball's going to, because it says what height does the ball rise to after the second bounce, so it's bounced once, and now needs to fall down again, bounce up again, and it's going to rise up again to say like about a height there, which is 80% of that height. That's the second bounce, and it rises up to here. So we need to work out 80% of 2.4 meters. So if we work out 80% of 2.4 meters, that'll tell us how high it reaches after the second bounce. And you just carry on, you then work out 80% of that number to find how high it reaches after the next bounce, 80% of that number, and so on. So let's work out 80% of 2.4 meters. So 2.4 divided by 100 is equal to 0.024, and then 0.024 multiplied by 80 is equal to 0.024 multiplied by 80 is equal to 1.92. So that's 1.92 meters. So that's how high the ball reaches after the second bounce, 1.92 meters. It falls from a height of 3 meters, rises up to 80% of that height, which is 2.4 meters, falls again, rises up to 80% of that height, which is 1.92 meters. And that's it, 1.92 meters. 1.92 meters. So I thought I had to scroll down a long way there. No, it's just there. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 35. So question number 35 says, James bought a house, and in the first year, the value of the house decreased by 10%. And in the second year, the value of the house increased by 10%. And the question says, is the house worth more, less, or the same as what James paid for it? Explain your answer. There's a few different ways we can approach this question. One approach is to let the house have a certain value to begin with, and to just decrease that by 10%. get that answer and then increase that by 10% and see what you get. Another approach is to use multipliers and have a look at what you get whenever you multiply the multipliers. And we'll actually have a look at both approaches in this question. So I'm going to let the price of the house to begin with be £100,000. You could let it be anything. You could let it be £1 million. You could let it be £1,000. That's a small house. But here I'm going to let it be £100,000. So in the first year, it decreases by 10%. So let's decrease this by 10%. That's a calculator question, so that's quite nice. We can take the 100,000 and we could divide it by 100 to find 1%, so that's going to be equal to 1,000. And then we could times the 1,000 by 10, and that's equal to £10,000. So that's how much it decreases by, so we just need to take that away from the price of the house to begin with. So 100,000 take away 10,000 is equal to £90,000. So that's how much the house would be worth after 1 year. Now it's going to increase by 10%. So we're going to increase this by 10%. So 90,000, we could divide by 100 to find 1%. And that's equal to 900. And then we could take the 900 and times that by 10 to find 10%. And that's equal to 9,000. Actually, I just want to mention in this question, to find 10% of a number, you could just divide by 10. So you could take the 100,000 divided by 10. That's equal to 10,000. And then you could get the 90,000 just divided by 10. That's equal to 9,000 and so on. But in this question, I've just found 1% and times it by 10. So we know for the second year, it goes up in value by 10%. So we take the 90,000, add on the 9,000, and that means the value of the house after 2 years is worth £99,000. So the value of the house has actually gone down. So the house is actually worth less than what it was whenever James paid for it. If it decreases by 10% and then increases by 10%, it's going to be worth less than what he paid for it. And the reason is whenever you work out 10% of that original value and then decrease it, whenever then you do 10% of the decreased value, it's not going to be as big as that initial 10%. So whenever you add it on, it's not going to reach £100,000. So that's it. That's one approach. So let's write that less. Okay, so we're now going to use another approach, and that's to use multipliers. So I'm going to let the value of the house be, to begin with, y. I'm just going to let it be y. And it says after the first year, it decreases by 10%. So if you want to decrease something by 10%, you're left with 90%, so the multiplier would be 0.9. So if we take y and you multiply by 0.9, that'll be equal to 0.9y. So that's the value of the house after 1 year, 0.9y. It's 0.9 whatever the value of the house is. And now it says in the second year, the value of the house increases by 10%. Now, to increase something by 10%, you then multiply by 1.1. If you multiply something by 1.1, it increases it by 10%. So if we've got 0.9y and we multiply that by 1.1, well, let's see what we get. That's a calculator question, so I can do my calculator. 0.9 multiplied by 1.1, and that's equal to 0.99, and then put the y on, 0.99y. And as you'll notice here, we've got that if the value of the house to begin with is y, the final value after 2 years would be 0.99y. And actually, that actually means that it's going to be 1% less, because if you multiply something by 0.99, it's a 1% reduction. You're reducing it by 1%. So that means it's going to be worth less, because you're multiplying by 0.99. If the final answer was y, it'd be the same amount. If it was 1 point something, then it's going to have gone up. In this case, it's 0.99. So if you multiply something by 0.99, it's going to get smaller, 1% smaller. So the answer is less. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 36. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 36. So question number 36 says, Keris wants to invest £4,000 for 2 years, and she's got 3 options. She's got Banks R Us, the Best Bank and Southern Bank, and they offer different rates of interest. Banks R Us offers 6% for the first year and then 1.5% for each extra year. The Best Bank offers 5% for the first year and then 2.5% interest for each year after that. And Southern Bank, they pay 7% interest for the first year and then 0.5% interest for each year afterwards. Now she's investing it for 2 years, so that means it's going to be 6% for the first year and then another 1.5% for the next year and so on. Okay, so if we then carry on, it says at the end of the 2 years, Keris wants to have as much money as possible. Yeah, that's hopefully the aim when you're investing money. And it says which bank should she invest the £4,000 in? Okay, so let's have a look at each of them. And I'm going to use multipliers for this question. So instead of dividing by 100 and then multiplying by 6 and then adding it on, I'm just going to use a multiplier. Let's start with Banks R Us. So she's got £4,000 to begin with. So if we start with the £4,000, Banks R Us pays 6% interest for the first year. So that means it's going to increase it by 6%. So the multiplier would be 1.06. And if we do 4,000 multiplied by 1.06, that'll tell us how much money is in the bank after 1 year. So that's equal to £4,240. So that's how much money Kersey would have in the bank after the first year. And then it says that Banks R Us pay 1.5% interest for each extra year. So because it's compound interest, what that means is we're now going to increase this amount, the £4,240, by 1.5%. So we're going to take the £4,240 and we're now going to multiply by, now if we want to increase by 1.5%, the multiplier will be 1.015, because if you've got 100% to begin with and you increase it by 1.5%, you'd have 101.5%, and as a decimal that's 1.015. So if we do £4,240 multiplied by 1.015, that's equal to £4,303.60. So that's how much Kirsty would have if she invested £4,000 for 2 years in Banks R Us. Now let's look at the other banks. The Best Bank, it's 5% for the first year. So let's take the £4,000, multiply that by 1.05, and that's equal to £4,200. So that's how much Kirsty would have after 1 year. It then says it's 2.5% for each extra year. So because it's compound interest, let's take the 2,400 and now let's multiply that by 1.025, because that'll increase it by 2.5%. And that's equal to, multiplied by 1.025, that's equal to £4,305. So that's actually more than Banks R Us. So at this stage, she's used the Best Bank rather than Banks R Us. Maybe the clue's in the name, the Best Bank. Let's have a look at Southern Bank. So it pays 7% for the first year. So 4,000 multiplied by 1.07. And that's equal to £4,280. So that's how much you'd have in that bank after 1 year. And then it pays 0.5% interest for the extra year. So let's take our £4,280 and multiply that by 1.005, because that would increase it by 0.5%. And that's equal to, if we multiply by 1.005, that's equal to £4,301.40. So actually that's less than the other two banks. So which bank should she use? The Best Bank. And let's explain that. Okay, let's have a look at our next question. So question number 37. Question number 37 says a company makes Christmas cards and birthday cards in the ratio 9:11. And 26% of the birthday cards that they made included a badge. And it says how many cards were birthday cards without a badge? Okay, so we've got the total number of cards. So let's work out how many birthday cards there were to begin with, and then we'll figure out how many didn't have a badge. So altogether, the company made 746,000 cards. Now we know that the ratio of Christmas cards to birthday cards is 9:11. So we want to work out how many birthday cards there are. So we want to work out the 11 parts in this ratio. So to do that, let's add together the numbers in the ratio. 9 plus 11 is equal to 20. So there's 20 parts altogether. Now let's divide the total by 20. So 746,000 divided by 20 is equal to 37,300. So that's how many birthday cards are on one part. Now we want to find out how many birthday cards there are, so we need to now multiply by 11 because we wanted 11 parts. We're multiplying by the birthday cards number in the ratio. So let's take the 37,300 and multiply that by 11. So if we multiply by 11, that's equal to 410,300. So that's how many birthday cards. I'm going to write that down, birthday cards. That's how many birthday cards there are. So birthday cards. Now, we want to find out how many birthday cards did not have a badge. So we're then told that 26% of the birthday cards had a badge. So we could work out 26% of this number and figure out what that is, and then take it away from how many birthday cards there were to find out how many birthday cards did not have a badge. Or what I'm going to do in this question is I'm going to say, well, if 26% of them had a badge, the rest, so 100 take away 26, is equal to 74%. So 74% of the birthday cards did not have a badge. So we need to work out 74% of 410,300. So let's do that. 410,300 divided by 100 is equal to 4,103. Then we're going to times by 74. So 4,103 multiplied by 74 is equal to 303,622. So those 303,622 birthday cards, you need to spell that right, birthday cards without a badge. Without a badge. And that's it. So the answer is 303,622. Okay, so let's have a look at our last question, question number 38. So question number 38 says the bag contains 9x green counters and 2x pink counters. And the number of green counters is decreased by 40%. And the number of pink counters is increased by 10%. And there's now 96 more green counters than pink counters in the bag. Work out the value of x. Okay, so what we're going to do here is, well, we know that the number of green counters is decreased by 40%. Now, I'm going to use multipliers in this question because we're dealing with algebra and it's just a bit easier to use multipliers whenever we're doing that. So we're going to decrease it by 40%. So if you decrease something by 40%, you're left with 60%. The multiplier for a 40% decrease would be 0.6. If you multiply something by 0.6, you decrease it by 40%. And here, for the number of pink counters, it's increased by 10%. So for a multiplier, well, if you've got 100%, you increase it by 10%, you'd have 110%, and that'll be 1.1, or 1.10, which is just 1.1. So I've just written down the two multipliers. Now we know the number of green counters is decreased by 40%. So if we take the number of green counters, which is 9x, and we decrease that by 40%, well, that's going to be multiplying it by 0.6. That'll tell us how many green counters are now in the bag. So let's do 9x multiplied by 0.6. Well, 9 times 0.6, that's a calculator question, is 5.4, and then we've still got our x. So that's how many green counters are in the bag. That's how many green counters are now in the bag. In terms of the pink counters, that's increased by 10%. So there's 2x pink counters in the bag to begin with. It's increased by 10%, so the multiplier is 1.1. And if we do 2x times 1.1, that'll tell us how many pink counters are in the bag. So 2 times 1.1 is 2.2, and then we've got our x. So that means there's 2.2x pink counters in the bag. Okay, so it's fantastic. We now know how many green counters are in the bag and how many pink counters are in the bag. Okay, they're in terms of x, it's not an actual number, but we've got our algebraic expressions for the number of green counters and pink counters. Now we're told there's 96 more green counters than pink counters in the bag. So that means that there's 96 more of these counters than these ones. So if we take them away, we get 96. So let's do that. 5.4x subtract 2.2x will be equal to 96. And that's an equation, and we can solve that, and that'll tell us x. So 5.4x take away 2.2x. Well, 5.4 take away 2.2 is 3.2x, and that's equal to 96. And now we want the x on its own, so we don't want this multiplied by 3.2, so let's divide by 3.2 and divide by 3.2. 3.2x divided by 3.2 would just be x, and then 96 divided by 3.2 is equal to 30. So that means that x is equal to 30. So that means x is 30, and that's it. If the question asked you how many counters were in the bag to begin with, you could do 9 times 30, which is 270. So there's 270 green counters to begin with in the bag. And there were 2x pink counters, so 2 times 30 is 60 pink counters. So there would have been 270 green counters and 60 pink counters to begin with. But that's not what the question asked us. The question asked us just to find x, and x is equal to 30. And that's it. And that's it. So these have been the video solutions to the Corbettmaths Practice Questions on percentages and dealing with percentages questions that are calculator questions. If you need any extra help on these topics, if you go to Corbettmaths and go to the videos and worksheets section and scroll down to video numbers 235 and 238, there's dedicated video tutorials there. Alternatively, you can scan this QR code. But in this video, we focus on the video solutions to the practice questions. I really hope you found this video useful. And if you have found it useful, please like it and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.